So everybody knows what bouldering is, or people that are here, I take it, all know what bouldering is. I jotted down some things. My background, I've been climbing for 18 years. Last time I was in, or the first time I was in the Red Rocks was 16 years ago. Been working for the BLM now for 8 years in Bishop. Kind of started with Scott. My background is range ecology, but they let me get out of the box. They talk about climbing and work on issues, because I deal with some major issues of grazing. But to kind of start out, I thought I'd mention some of the positive things that bouldering and climbing have in a community, because we have our negative impacts, but there are good things with climbing. It's a lifestyle, we all like to climb, so we're pretty committed through outdoor recreation. With bouldering, you could do it by yourself, which is nice, or you can, and it becomes more of a social event, so it does have its concentration and uses as we do those social activities. For me, it allows for me to leave work and climb and focus on something other than work. That's what climbing brings to me. And bouldering is a way to train for climbing. Some people use it as their only sport, but it also allows you to train in those ways, and it's become a sport in itself in the last 10 years, big time. And recently I found out that it's a lot easier to do with kids than climbing, because it's not so easy to rope up. You're kind of tied in. The bouldering community does have a strong user group, I would say. It does bring economic revenue to communities, especially Bishop, because it is a small town, and so we get people from all over the world coming in to Bishop, and it's a world-renowned bouldering spot, along with the alpine climbing and the rock climbing. I find that climbers do assist in volunteer projects, so if you guys are willing to host the projects, people will show up. And in my view, bouldering does have minimal impacts compared to other user groups. I mean, the impacts occur around the boulders and getting to the boulders, but in the big scheme of things, I think it's minimal impacts. You don't have the hardware, and it is a concentrated use, so if you can get your hands wrapped around the issues, it's concentrated. So then I thought I'd lead into what are some of the impacts, and then I'll let these guys talk about how they've addressed them. One of the biggest impacts is the lack of education and ethics associated with bouldering, because I think when you get users coming in from out of the area that aren't the locals, you have to really teach them how to respect and how to climb in that area. You do have vegetation damage. People do remove vegetation around the boulders. There's landscaping, moving rocks. We recently have been dealing with some of the weed importations of Russian thistle into the Happy and Sad boulders, so that's kind of been new. Human waste, is a major impact. So bathrooms at trailheads or campgrounds. The camping issue, where people are camping when they show up to your area. And parking areas and off-roading, so people, drive off-road to go find a boulder, and I've seen it happen, with OHV and stuff like that. And sometimes I would consider bouldering lazy, so people don't want to go all that far and throw down their pad. So then you have access trails and trail braiding. We have trash issues and micro trash, as we call it, with cigarette butts and tape. Then there's the archaeological sites that are often found around boulders or climbing areas, and those lead to tribal relations with government and tribes. So really trying to find that balance on how to use an area. We've also dealt a lot with publishing guidebooks in our area and how that leads to really impacts to that area, and working with that guidebook author to provide the right information to your area is important. Dogs are an issue. We have that problem, especially in the desert environment of Bishop running around all over the shrubs. Mark will talk about some of the recent things of stashing pads in wilderness areas and how some users might not like that. And he mentioned bouldering in the backcountry isn't unmanaged. It's becoming unmanaged. And then some of the other impacts, not necessarily impacts, but something to touch on is the consistencies with other agencies. And so you have a Forest Service and a BLM, and you have a split line, and you have boulders on both sides, and how each agency is managing, and it's not often consistent. It's hard to sometimes get the other agency involved, and then the interagency cooperation.